I have given this video some careful thought. If you've been on the channel before, you've probably heard me mention that I have anxiety. This is not going to be a super unique story. I think a lot of people have anxiety, but I think everyone has a somewhat unique perspective on anxiety, and I think that there's a lot that we can learn from each other if we're willing to share. So I've got several goals in this video, and really the biggest one is just to share, just to be transparent, to show other people that I'm just a real human, even though I'm up here on this platform on YouTube. And in sharing, I hope that this could be a comfort to other people to realize that you're not alone, that a lot of people do deal with anxiety. And then I also want to educate people on what has helped my anxiety, and maybe that it would help other people. Anxiety, fear, stress, doubt, tons of other emotions are what I think is just the human experience. I think that we experience all of these things to some degree or another, but what can happen is people end up feeling isolated, thinking they're the only ones going through that. You might end up thinking, oh, there's something wrong with me, or I wish I wasn't like this, I wish I could be like this person. And we're all kind of going through, I think, a lot of the same struggles, and when we share, I really think that it lifts other people up. It helps them. I've gotten comments on the channel before, or just from people in regular life saying, you have anxiety? That's crazy. You seem like you have it all together. And that's a compliment. Thank you. But I don't think anyone ever has it truly all together. And if they're telling you that they do, then they're lying, because I think that we're all just human. So I have never shared a video specifically about what makes me anxious. But I'm going to share that, and I just ask that don't have pity on me. I am super happy. I don't look at my anxiety as anything that's super negative or anything that really drags me down. So I want to give you a little bit of background information kind of as we start this video. So at the time of filming this, I am 26, almost 27 years old, and I would say that I have had pretty active anxiety since I was about 13 years old. Looking back, I was always kind of a worrier. I stressed about things. I was like a very sensitive child. My parents confirmed this when I was little. I can remember lots of instances worrying and stressing about stuff. I remember when my cousins were having their driveway paved, we walked down to just kind of see what was going on. I walked down with my parents, and I touched the bumper of one of the asphalt trucks, and I pulled my hand away, and I had a speck of asphalt on my finger. That petrified me. I immediately told my parents that I felt sick, that I was freezing, that I needed to go home. So they gave me a pair of gloves. I threw up and I passed out for 3 hours. And that was all because of that asphalt. I was so scared about it being on my hand, even though it didn't hurt me, and I was terrified what my parents would think, even though they wouldn't be mad at me. That's nothing. I can remember as a kid laying in the bed, terrified if I rolled over, I would squash my stuffed animals and kill them. I can remember having this like compulsive need to count things, and I felt like if I didn't, something bad would happen to me. I remember saying no offense. I would preface like everything I said with no offense, even if it was something nice, because I was terrified of hurting someone's feelings. So you kind of get the picture here. This kind of tracks back to even when I was a kid, and then in my early teens I had panic attacks where my heart and my mind would just race, and it was really terrible, and I didn't really know what was going on, and that eventually led me to a Christian counselor that I actually still see today. And somewhere along those lines in my early adult life, my grandma, Miss Cindy, introduced me to a term called highly sensitive person. And this was very interesting for me because I felt like it was a great description of what I was feeling. I've got my computer right here. I wrote down some notes so I wouldn't forget. So kind of a basic definition of a highly sensitive person is that you have increased or like a deepened central nervous system sensitivity to like physical, emotional, or social stimulus. I do feel like I process things very deeply. There's a lot on my mental plate at any given time, so this felt like a very accurate description for me, and maybe it feels like an accurate description for you. So if you feel like you process things deeply, it might be worth looking up the term highly sensitive person. So I've shared a little bit of background, but now I want to share a few things that kind of specifically make me anxious, and then I want to share some things that help me. There's just different things that make me anxious. One of the big ones is work. I would say I'm a workaholic. I love to work. I like to get projects done. That's very rewarding for me. But the anxiety side comes in because sometimes I feel like I've not done enough, like I'm not doing enough. If I can't get a certain amount of things done in a day, that really bothers me. And I've kind of discovered that I have my worth tied into my work, which I know is an issue there. That's your worth is not tied up with your work, but that's something that has caused me a lot of stress or anxiety in my life. I don't like to feel out of control. I would say that I am a control freak. If I go on a trip, if I go on vacation, it's exciting and I do want to go on vacation, but it's also super anxiety inducing for me because it's new. I've not been to that place. I've not ate at those restaurants. I just don't feel like I'm in control. I'm definitely not spontaneous. I like to have a routine. I do not like if that routine gets broken. It just makes me feel out of control. Perfectionist. I'm a big perfectionist. That kind of ties back in with the work. I feel like I have to just at any given time be giving my all, and if I'm not, then I have like a big fear of failure. Olive. That makes me anxious. Did you see my face right there? That loud noise just absolutely terrified me. And it was only Olive running around the deck playing. Anyways, getting back to what we're talking about here. Yes, I have a fear of failure, always feeling like, am I doing enough? Am I getting enough done? That's something that really weighs on my mental plate. Of course, uncertainty. I think everyone has uncertainty. That kind of links back to that just need to be in control. Sometimes thinking, oh my gosh, if Katie's, my sister's driving to the post office, what if she gets in a car accident? Even though I know I shouldn't be thinking that way. Just uncertainty of things. I'm a big overthinker. You probably have maybe noticed that by now. I overthink a lot of things. Decisions sometimes are hard for me to make. I would say I'm very indecisive, and I think that overthinking comes from this need to be in control because I want to try to predict every outcome even though I can't. Another thing that causes me great anxiety, I mentioned kind of earlier, is I just feel like I cannot function if I think I have hurt someone's feelings. I really worry sometimes. I'll say something, I'll think, oh my gosh, what if that come off in a bad way? I do not want to hurt anyone's feelings. It's hard to explain how bad that bothers me. And I'm not trying to say that because I'm a super virtuous person or anything like that. I put intrusive thoughts on this list. Praise God, I have not struggled with these very much because I know some people do and it can be crippling. But of course, intrusive thoughts just being, what if I do something bad? What if something bad happens to me? None of that really has bothered me too much throughout my life. Sometimes, if I heard about something like a child getting hurt or something, that would really scare me and just stick in my mind. And then I might think, what if someone else gets hurt? Things like that. Impending doom. This is something, you may have heard this term before, impending doom. It's just this feeling where you just feel anxious and you just don't even know why. It's almost like there's a roadblock in your brain and you just feel like something's wrong even though you don't really know what it is. I struggled with that a lot when I was in my young teens, and then I haven't for a long time until recently. And it's really kind of hard to pinpoint. I think some people might refer to that as generalized anxiety. And then one more thing I'll talk about that causes me perhaps the most anxiety, and I was very hesitant to mention this because I don't want to receive any comments telling me that I have an eating disorder or that I have issues, but I have food anxiety big time. And it's not because I'm scared about gaining weight. It's that I have a sensitive stomach, and often things I eat make me feel sick or make me feel bad. And that kind of tracks as well. When I was young, Mom said that Katie and I, my sister and I, both had just really sensitive digestive tracts, and we would get sick easily. And I guess somewhere along the line as a child I got sick, and no one enjoys feeling sick of your stomach or feeling like you have indigestion problems. And I guess that scared me, and so then that made me think, what if the next thing I eat makes me feel like that? And it's kind of like self-fulfilling prophecy. And of course, what happens to your digestion if you're nervous? It kind of shuts down to pull resources back to your core. So that's been something that I have greatly struggled with. So as you can imagine, even just going to a restaurant for me is like super anxiety inducing, because we eat at home a lot. I never grew up eating out, and so I'm just really used to food that I cook or that my parents cook. And going out to a new restaurant and thinking, well, I don't know who's prepared this. What if this makes me sick? I know that probably sounds crazy, but I want to share this in case that there's someone else out there who has this same anxiety. And even if you don't have this anxiety, hopefully it will make you feel better to see that there's other people with other anxieties as well. But again, I promise I don't have an eating disorder. It feels silly for me to even say that, but recently, in the last like 2 weeks, I got a comment on the channel that said, you look like you have an eating disorder. I'm just skinny, folks. I'm just built that way. It's very hard for me to gain weight, which I know is a blessing. Anyways, so as you can see, a lot of my anxiety is just mental battles, a lot kind of going on in my mind. Unfortunately for me, that can like lead to self-deprecation, just being really hard on myself and thinking I should be able to do better than this, you know, why am I like this kind of deal. It makes it very hard to focus, and that kind of leads us into kind of some physical symptoms of least anxiety for me. One of those is gritting my teeth at night. I actually cracked one of my teeth doing that. Didn't know that I had cracked it, and had to get a crown on it, which kind of caused some tooth sensitivity and other issues. Of course, feeling sick at my stomach, being anxious can make you feel sick at your stomach, make you very tired. Interesting symptom for me is right back here, kind of at the nape of my neck. If I go through a stressful period, I find that it's very itchy, just for no reason. And then once the stress kind of eases off, it goes away. For me, during the day, if I feel anxious, there's just tons of rumination in my mind. So hard to focus, so hard to be in the moment, because I just feel like my mind is going crazy. But probably the worst symptom for me, anxiety-wise, happens at night. If I'm anxious during the day, I can pretty much deal with it. But if I've had an anxious day, boy, it really gets me at night. And I can lay down to go to sleep, and here it comes, and I can feel it from the top of my head down to my feet. Just this terrible feeling that washes over me, that makes me feel like I'm going to vomit. It makes me just feel like my skin is crawling. It makes me just almost feel like I'm in shock, and it's terrible. I don't have that as much anymore, thank goodness, but occasionally I still get that, and I think it's just my nervous system just, I guess, being pushed to the max. Another thing that people will say sometimes, you hear people say wired and tired when you're trying to sleep and you close your eyes and your mind just takes off. I have that some, not as much as I used to. And kind of one more sort of physical symptom, and then I want to talk about what has really helped me with my anxiety. Going back to the highly sensitive person thing, a good description for what anxiety feels like for me is just that I can't clear my mental plate, kind of like what I just talked about. So just simple experiences, like a conversation with someone or being in the grocery store, it just makes me feel not unsettled in like a scared way. I'm not scared of the grocery store or talking to someone, but it just makes my mind feel unsettled, like somehow I just can't fully process what it is. Like if I have a conversation or go to the grocery store or whatever it is, I might be still thinking about that hours later, whereas I feel like a lot of people might just be like, oh, I'm just going to the grocery store, and then that's it. You don't think about it anymore. So that was a lot about me. If you're still with me thus far, I thank you for that. I want to spend the next half of this video just talking about what has greatly helped me with my anxiety. So as I said, I've had very active anxiety since I was 13, so that's about 13 years or so, and you know, I've done a lot and experienced a lot, and there's so many things that help me, and that was one of my main motivations behind this video, is just sharing what does help me. And there's just so much to this video. There's so much more in depth that I could go, but I wanted to just kind of make this first video. If there's interest, I can definitely go deeper, but I'm very passionate about sharing what helps me because I just want to help other people in any way that I can. So the main thing that helps me is my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I want to get back to that because first I kind of want to set up some groundwork, and then when I kind of bring back in how Jesus helps me, it'll make a little bit more sense. So I want to be careful in what I say here, because I don't want to invalidate anyone's experiences. I don't want to shame anyone or anything like that. Just bear in mind, I'm just sharing what helps me. So I believe everything I have shared thus far is just simply part of human experience to one degree or one level or another. But I think what happens in our society and our culture today, people very easily get labeled as, well, mental illness. You have anxiety, you have a mental illness, and I think that's a big problem. I don't think that everyone who feels these things has some kind of mental illness. And again, I'm not trying to invalidate anyone's experiences, but for me, I try to be very careful in how I think about myself. So of course, in making this video, I had to call it something. So I called it what it feels like to have anxiety. But I don't like to say the terms my anxiety or my issues or my problems. I think that's very negative to my mind and like my psychological well-being. So I'm very careful in what I say. So instead of saying I have a mental illness or I have anxiety, instead I like to say, I've got a crow party going on. I like to say I know my own quirks, I know other people have quirks, and I just do what I know helps me. I think that is much more positive to my mind, my body, my spirit than saying I have anxiety, I have a mental illness. I think self-fulfilling prophecy happens a lot, and when we're labeled with these things, especially early on, you can just end up kind of fulfilling that, and that can really hold you back. So I'm very careful in how I talk to myself. So anyone with anxiety needs a toolbox, and you may be saying, what's a toolbox? But this is just mental strategies for coping with whatever is causing you this anxiety. So I've got 10 tools that I want to share, and I'll try to kind of be quick because I know I'm already at 20 minutes here. The first tool is recognizing the power of your mind is very strong. You get to decide what you think. You do not have to think everything that falls in your head. We have thousands and thousands of thoughts every day, and you get to decide what you think. Number 2 goes right along with that. Self-awareness is so important. If you can get to the bottom of what's causing you anxiety, then you can start to figure out how to fix it. If you can name it, you can tame it. You've probably heard that. So in the first example that I shared of me feeling anxious due to work, I was able to get to the bottom of that and say, why am I feeling so upset if I can't get X, Y, and Z done? It's because I had my worst tied up with how much I was able to get done. Once you have that as the problem, then you can start to tackle that. But if you don't even really know what's causing you to feel anxious, then it's hard to do any work. Which goes on to number 3, which is reframing your thoughts. Now, this is a cognitive behavioral therapy. You may have heard about neural pathways in your brain. Every time you think a thought, it becomes easier to think the next time. I like to use the example at my parents' house. When we step off the deck and walk into the yard, there's a well-beaten path because we've walked that path many times. If we stopped walking that path today, would it grow up overnight? No, it would take time. So it's the same thing with your thoughts. You can cast down the negative thoughts, the thoughts that once you are self-aware and you realize the thoughts that are bothering you, you can reframe those and switch them out for positive thoughts. Now, you may say, how do I know which thoughts to ditch and cast out? Ask yourself this simple question. Are these thoughts based on fact? And if the answer is no, then they're not going to serve you and you need to get rid of them. And ask yourself, are these thoughts negative? Are they self-deprecating? Are these thoughts healthy or are they unhealthy? And that will help you figure out which thoughts that you need to reframe. Number 4, don't let fear take over. You have to be careful. We can accidentally teach ourselves to become anxious. So going back to my example, early on in childhood, when I ate something that upset my tummy, that's a normal human experience. That's going to happen to all of us at some point. But I let that determine my next however many meals into my adulthood. You don't need to let whatever you experience set up a fear complex to where you're always anxious about it. So it's good to be mindful of that. Number 5, Feelings and emotions are not the truth. You have to be very careful. If you buy into how you feel over what's really true, that will keep you stuck for years and cause you tons of problems. God did make us with feelings, but you don't have to become those feelings. You have to be very careful about that. There's so many different things I could say about emotions there. Maybe I'll make another video about it at some point. Number 6 is remembering this too shall pass. My mom taught me this as a little girl, and it's so true. You have to remind yourself everyone has good days and everyone has bad days. And for me, sometimes I'll go weeks now and not have anything that makes me anxious. And then all of a sudden, things in my life are going on, and I might have weeks where it's just tough. But you have to remind yourself those good days will come again. Number 7 is seeing things from the positive side. So even things that cause you to be anxious, even if you are a somewhat perhaps sensitive person like I am, seeing the positive side of that. So me having this kind of nature allows me to be sympathetic and empathetic to other people. And instead of fighting tooth and nail these kind of maybe predispositions that I have to be like this, I just accept them and say, God made me this way and I'm thankful for this, and I will use it to the best of my ability. It will go a lot easier on you if you don't kick and scream and fight tooth and nail. Now that's not to say that you shouldn't try to remedy your anxiety or things that make you anxious, but it will be a lot easier if you're not fighting tooth and nail. Number 8 is watching what you eat, looking at how much sleep you're getting, the quality of your sleep, your screen time. These are just basic things that are going to nourish your mind, your body, and your spirit. If you are nourished, you will find probably that you're not going to be as anxious, and you will find that even if you are, it will be much easier to deal with it. But if you are not eating well, you're not getting enough sleep, you're not feeling well, it's not going to be easy. Number 9, preventative measures. Don't let your stress build up and overflow. This was something that I had to learn. You think of stress as like drops in a bucket, but if your bucket is always just right at the top about to overflow, all it takes is 1 or 2 things to just make you, get angry or get upset, whatever it is for you. That's all it takes. So you want to really think about preventative measures. Now, number 10. So I mentioned at the beginning of these 10 tools that God was what helped me the most. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. All of these tools that I just talked about, I use in conjunction with God. So deciding what I get to think and looking at reframing thoughts, I look at that as casting down negative thoughts, and that God tells us that in the Bible. Paul talks to us in 2 Corinthians 10:5 and says, casting down all imaginations that exalteth themselves before the knowledge of God, taking captive every thought to the obedience of Christ. That is very powerful for me, and I use that verse all the time. Reframing thoughts. This is looking at how God tells us to think, and looking at ourselves, how God looked at us, being kind to ourselves. When I'm trying not to let fear take over, I'm leaning on God. I'm trusting in God. Everything I mention is viewed through the lens of Christ for me. And especially reading my Bible as much as I can, getting as much Jesus down in this heart and in my mind as I can, deepening my trust, knowing that I can run to Jesus no matter what I'm feeling, has made the biggest difference for me. I can't tell you what a difference that's made for me. I still have anxiety. I know my own quirks. I know that I'm a sensitive person, and it's not like I've completely figured everything out, but using these tools and especially relying on my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ brings me more peace than I can tell you. Like I said, I have had anxiety, active anxiety, from when I was 13 until now. I'll be 27 this month. I took anxiety medication. I've tried lots of different things, but the main thing that helps me is Jesus, and using these tools daily, in and out. And I so hope that this video will be a help to you. I hope that you'll be able to find something from this video that just lets you know you're not alone. Other people have anxiety, me included. It's a very normal human experience. So I hope that you will leave me a comment below and let me know if there's anything that you would like me to dive deeper on. This is a subject that I'm very passionate about. I want to share and lift people up, and I pray for my YouTube family daily, and if there's anything I can pray for you about, leave a comment below because I would love to pray for you. As always, thank you for watching. God bless you. God keep you. And I'll see you on the next video.